there. I am going to show you how to use buttons and sliders and make them in Open Processing. So first things first, you're in your little My Sketch here. So in the function setup, what I like to do and what I've learned from someone else is make this little function called make inputs. So what this is going to do is it's going to let you organize all your inputs. So whether that be sliders or buttons, in my case, it lets us do that. What I like to do is have a bunch of tabs up here, and this is the easiest way to do it for me, to organize my stuff. So my make inputs here goes to my buttons and my sliders. So here I have three different variables, and I'm going to explain them there. The explaining is actually right here. This variable sets how far from the left side of my window my buttons will be. This variable sets how far from the top, and in my program they start at 40. And Z here is the size of my buttons. So when we are setting the size and the placement of the buttons, the placement is actually in your window, not in your canvas. So if you set it to 0, 0, it does not set it in the top left of your canvas. It actually sets it in the top left of your window. So that's something really important to note. So I called that make inputs back here on my sketch, and I called it. So what it says is, okay, what do you want me to do? This little create button here, this is a pre-built function in Open Processing, and it creates a button. So you name the button whatever you want it to name. You won't see this in the program, but mine is button difference. The text that you put in right here what will be displayed on the button. You can use this little dot position function to position it wherever you want. In mine, I like having this variable x and y because if I want to, so if I run my program, so all my buttons are set at x, and then my y's are set like plus 30, so the buttons are equally spaced. So if I hit play here, we can see my buttons. Cool. So the reason why I use that x and y is because if I change this x now, instead of 10, if I change it to 200, if I put the number in here, just the number, like 0, I would have to change every single one of those to 200. This way, all I do is put 200 at the top, and bam, it changes them all. And of course, if you're looking at my code there, I obviously forgot to change a couple of the x's, so this is actually a good way to troubleshoot too. So I obviously forgot to change my x's, so I'm looking for the ones that I forgot to change it. Here's one of them. So there's a 10, and there's another 10. Cool. So if I hit play now, it moves them all. Sweet. So if I change that back to 0 or back to 10, it'll move it back to the other side of my screen. Same thing with Y. If I wanted to shift all the buttons down, so actually if I leave this at 200, and if I change my Y to, let's say 100, it actually moves all the buttons down and right. Cool. So that's just kind of something there with the buttons. So we can just actually, we'll change it back to what I originally had it. So I think I had it at 10 and 0. So the button different dot position changes and puts the button at this position. For the button size, I have a Z here because I wanted to be able to change all my buttons at once. So if I change this to 50, it makes all my buttons smaller. Cool, now they're all tiny. But that doesn't fit with my text, so I'm just going to change that back to 100 now. But that lets me change all my buttons at once, the size. And then the most important part that we do here is this button diff.mouse pressed. So when the mouse is pressed, we want to do something. In my case, I call whatever I want to do, my function, in this. So this one we'll call the function diff. This one we'll call the function dark, light, molt, add. So it's calling a bunch of different things. So what is it calling, you might ask? Well, that's why I have my functions tab. So we go in here, and if you remember, diff and dark were a bunch of different things. Here's the button diff. So it calls this function, and it just changes the blend mode to difference. And that's it. That's all it does. Cool. So if I go back to here, I can go to any of these buttons, and I could go find the function in here and see what it does. The last thing that I'm going to talk about are creating sliders. So at the very top of this page, I said or at the very beginning, I have let sliders. And I think I have this over here. I should probably actually put this on my buttons and sliders page to make a little more sense. But let slider lets me get these sliders. And when we are making a slider, the first two numbers, the 0 and 100, are my beginning and end range. So 0 is the start and 100 is the end. This 0 here says where my slider is going to start. So if I hit the play button, if I change this one to 30, it'll start the circle slider at 30. It starts it at 30 instead of starting it at 0. Okay, cool. If I wanted to increment this little 1, increments it by 1 at a time. If I wanted to do 20, we're only going to have 5 different options for my colors instead of 100. So as you can see, it jumps. And I couldn't get near as many colors, so that's why my step is actually set to 1, so I can get a bunch of different colors in there for my sliders. The slider dot position works the same way as the button dot position, puts it up in that top left corner. And then the slider style, this is going to actually tell us the width of the slider. I want it to be 100 pixels here. So you take the width and you take how many pixels you want it to be. Okay. That's about all we got here with buttons and sliders, seeing if we have anything else crazy here that we want to do. So just remember that when this little dot mouse press is also pre-programmed into open processing, so it can call this function that I made in my functions tab. So I have a bunch of different functions that we can do after I press the button. Or when the slider is slid, I can take the value of my slider, whatever it might be, and over here in my functions, I actually have that for my slider, and it'll pick the color here according to whatever the slider value is here in my. So let, I get that from the let slider, I get the value of the slider, and it sets that color equal to that number.